All right. Oh, here we go. We're redirecting to Facebook. Okay. All right. We are now live on Facebook. Hi, everybody. This is Dina Alexander with Educate and Empower Kids. Today, I am lucky enough to be talking to Anne Blythe of BTR, Betrayal Trauma Recovery. We are going to be talking about some simple ways to talk to your kids about various dangers living in the digital age. So I would first like to introduce Anne, or actually Anne, if you could introduce yourself to us. Tell us what you do and what brought you into this work.
I am the founder of Betrayal Trauma Recovery. I have a podcast that's free. It's an educational podcast about what to do if you have pornography in your home in relation to your own husband. It's only for women. I know that many women are addicted to pornography themselves, but our particular organization is only for women who are not porn users, who are married to or divorced from or separated from porn users. What do you do? How do you navigate that in a family? So many women, when they find out about their husband's porn use, they're completely devastated. They have no idea what to do. And we give them steps to take to know how to progress forward.
Awesome. And I've seen your work. I've heard your podcast, and I know you guys do amazing work. And I've seen, your following grow incredibly, and that's because you're serving a huge need that has not been met previously. And so I really appreciate the work that you're doing. Now, I have noticed, as I have done this in the last few years, that a lot of parents just don't know what they don't know. So what do you think parents need to know about growing up in the digital age, about being a kid here in the digital age?
I think a lot of parents know that their kids are good kids, right? And they are good kids. They're fantastic, but they are exposed to a lot of things, not just visually. So not just exposure with pornography in and of itself, although they are exposed to that, but also just talking about it, the way people talk about sexuality, the way people talk about pornography. And because they're going to be exposed, and they're exposed on a daily basis all the time, depending on the media they watch or school people at school, that is the number one thing you need to know, is that they've heard all these words before. And if you don't tell them and you don't start that discussion and you don't have an ongoing open discussion about it, that they're going to feel uncomfortable talking to you. My goal was always, I want them to hear the word masturbation or pornography or whatever word it's going to be from me first, so that they know, oh, this is something that we talk about. And you asked what we need to know, but I think one thing parents need to feel is comfortable talking about these topics, so that it can just roll off your tongue like, hey, we're going to talk about porn later, and also you peel the carrots, right? Like, it's just regular stuff that we're doing every day, all day long.
That's how it is at the Alexander home.
Yeah.
Like, we're having dinner and we're talking about pornography and masturbation. I have two sons right now. I have one that's 15 and one that's 12. And yeah, that topic comes up frequently. It's a discussed topic over and over again in middle and high school. And I love what you said, that saying the words first. To me, that is huge, because that is where you let your kids know this is not a big deal to talk about, but also they know that they can trust you, that you're not going to embarrass them, that you're not going to freak out. And this is something that we forget about. We forget about what freaked us out about talking, certain topics in talking to our parents. And, recently I got a call from a parent in I believe it's the San Luis Obispo School District in California. So they have this huge, all-encompassing healthy sexuality program that they are working out. It's from the state of California, but they have kind of been trying to, find something that's more of a comfortable fit for their area. It's a little bit more conservative than, say, a lot of California. And, a lot of parents really disturbed about what they want to teach middle schoolers. And when I talked with this parent, I had to say, I'm really not worried about this stuff for middle schoolers and high schoolers. To me, yes, a middle schooler needs to know about oral sex and anal sex and vaginal sex. And that's not something that a lot of parents are comfortable with, but it's something we need to be comfortable with, because those are shown over and over again in pornography, and not in healthy ways, not in intimate ways, not in loving ways. And so that was something huge for me that I kind of was, now elementary school, it's different. That's where you got to know your child, right? So anywho, now you have seen a lot, you have experienced a lot in your organization and in your personal life with the pain, the frustration of pornography use in your family. So what do you think is the most important thing for kids to avoid?
What we see frequently with active pornography users is a cloud of lying and deception around them in their families, generally speaking. So, for example, their wife will find out, whoa, I didn't know that he'd been using pornography for 20 years, right? And so, in order to live that type of double life, there has to be a cloud of that. So, the thing that I teach my kids that's the most important is honesty is the only way out. That in order to solve a problem, or in order to move forward, or in order to actually like repair something, honesty is the only solution. And you have to practice that by being honest yourself, right? And that's kind of hard. And there have been times where I'm like, no, you can't have the chocolate because, and I'm like, oh, because I want to eat it, right? You know, and then I'm like, that's a bad excuse, you know? So then I'm like, because I want to eat it, you know? I mean, like I've seen myself with little lies with my kids and thinking, okay, you know what? If I expect them to tell the truth, I need to tell the truth myself. Telling the truth to yourself, telling the truth to God, if you're a believer in God, telling the truth to other people is essential to be able to solve problems. And that is probably, I'd say, the heart of what I try to teach my kids are principles that can help them apply to many different situations. But honesty is probably the biggest one for me.
I absolutely agree, especially since integrity and honesty are just being diminished everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's so much easier for me to say something behind a screen, to be, really mean, or to act one way in real life and then to act another way with a screen. I am dying for some long-term research for us to see what is going on with human beings in the last 10 years. The smartphone is only about 10 years old, but what has changed us so much that we turn into different animals with this, right? We express love differently. We express our emotions differently. We are not the same people behind a screen as we are, and we've got to be. This is where we live. This is where our kids live, is on these screens, is online, and we need to teach them integrity. So I think that's totally important. So thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, well, in talking about pornography and talking about various technology, gaming, where do you think a parent should start? Because there's so many places, and I think, again, parents feel, I know we come across a lot of parents who are just terrified talking about sex, talking about pornography, but where should a parent start?
Well, I started with my parents when they were really, not my parents, sorry, my children, when they were very young. And I just want to give one example. In our home, everything is on the table to talk about. So my 9-year-old son was having problems with his penis. It was like sticking to him. It was kind of bugging him. So he walked into the kitchen one day and he said, "Mom, you don't know what it's like to have a penis, but it is a pain." And I said, "Is it? Like, I don't know. Tell me about it." And he was just like, "Yeah, this happens and this is so annoying." And I said, "Well, you don't know what it's like to have a vagina. So if you're ever interested in that, let me know." And he stopped and he was like, "I do want to know." Now, this is too much information for your listeners, but I'm going to say it anyway.
No, this is great.
I had a yeast infection. Okay. So I said, "I've got this stuff coming out of it and it's itchy and it's burning and I don't like it. And right now my vagina is really bothering me. Like, it's a big pain." I didn't realize that my 6-year-old was listening and he was kind of around the corner. So we have, and my son was like, "Oh, Mom, I'm really sorry. I didn't know that happened." Yeah, he was super compassionate about it. And he was like, "Oh, that sounds hard. I'm kind of glad I don't have a vagina." He was just like, "Huh. And that uterus thing sounds like a pain, And I was like, "Yeah, right now it's kind of a pain." So anyway, the next day at breakfast, we're sitting there eating breakfast. And I wasn't thinking anything about it. Nobody's talking about it. And my 6-year-old son is eating his cereal. And he says, "My mom has a moldy uterus." As he's just eating his cereal. And I said, "Yeah, right now I kind of do. And it's a pain." And all my kids just looked at me and they're like, "Sorry, Mom, that stinks." But the cool thing about it is, like, talking about my uterus or whatever is fine at my house. It's totally fine. So I think the place to start is little tiny conversations about consent, about what pornography is, about, like, "Did you see that pornography today?" Or about body parts, or about anything. It just little tiny ongoing layered dialogue that happens at any time. And that's, I think, the scariest place for people to start, because they think, oh, I have to say the right thing, or, oh, I've got to like make this count, or I have to really teach them. But I think if you just kind of really tell them the truth about your life and what you're going through, and things come up naturally anyway, and just start, even if you don't think that you have the right thing to say, just start a little conversation today.
Absolutely. It's like there's no right way, there's no wrong way to start this. And that, I think, is where, again, like you say, there's many of these natural places that kind of fit in. And I think parents more, instead of following that instinct, they clam up, or they think, I need to wait till they're older. And that's just not true. It's like you want to be that first source. You want to start young. And you're right. You want it to be just these simple little conversations. It doesn't have to be this huge, life-changing experience. You're just planting little seeds. You're just establishing things so that when they do have the big questions, you're ready. And you're building this foundation so that you can have those big conversations. So we have just this week, we are releasing our second edition of How to Talk to Your Kids About Pornography. So here it is. I'm really excited about it. We're basically we're doing an official launch in the next couple of weeks. But we had originally, this book was 5.5 inches by 8.5 inches. It was smaller. It was a little more crammed. And so we have gotten some different feedback from parents. And so we have made this bigger, a little bit more easier to read, a little bit more accessible, a few more graphics to make it simple. And one of the big questions we have in there is about, where do you start, right? So real easy conversations about defining pornography. To me, that's a huge thing to do, because kids hear that word, whether they hear it at church from a lesson, whether they hear that at school from friends. My daughter was first exposed to pornography in the 3rd grade by another 3rd grade girl. At recess, it was, just briefly, but it was enough to capture her curiosity and for her to start Googling, right? And that was long before I got involved in any of this. And I was just lucky enough that she came and told me about it. I had not yet figured out this whole situation. I had not done the research that I've done now. And with my boys, I was able to have a different conversation with them, of just defining it, of letting them know real simply, they're going to see it, you're going to see it, whether that's on the bus. We've talked about so many different times, the different places you're going to see that. My son in high school, it's in the classroom, it's at lunchtime, it's all over the place. They are living in a very rated R world, and then at different instances being, exposed to a lot of X-rated behavior. And so defining it for them at a young age of pornography is naked people with or little or no clothing. And sometimes and often there is sexual acts in it. So sometimes it can be that simple. I think that, again, we think we have to have this big definition or we have to have all the answers, but it can be that simple, especially for small children, when you want to let them know, just real easy. And then letting them know what to do when they do see it. You want them to know, when you see it, you come and tell me, or you go and tell the adult whether that's the teacher, the scout leader, your coach, you let them know, hey, I saw pornography there, or you come and tell me, especially the parents, that's my big thing, tell us, and then we can help you make sense of it. And I have repeated this as my kids have gone through high school, because what their young brains interpret is so different from what we have. My kids who, again, as they've gotten older, they have had so many different experiences with various disgusting things online, whether on their own or usually at school. I'm sure you've heard how popular, unfortunately, sexting is. And they don't even call it sexting anymore. That's now becoming an old term that I've had to come to grips with.
What do they call it now?
They're just calling it sharing nudes. It's just nudes.
Oh.
They just refer to it as nudes, sharing nudes, trading nudes, typically.
Okay.
And they're being exposed to this so often. And again, that's just so different from us, from what we would have experienced. I never saw a naked picture of any of my classmates ever in my whole high school. I still have never seen one. I hope I never see one of them, right? But again, they're seeing that more often than we realize. And this is something, again, that we need to talk about. Well, what do we do when we see that? How does that make us feel? What kind of compassion can we have for the people in it, but also knowing that this is wrong and that we are not going to participate in this and that we are going to reject that. That is a great discussion. So Anne, you have an amazing podcast and do various public speaking. What have you learned from parents in the last few years? Because I don't even know if I can contain all the wisdom I have learned from other parents in the last few years. What have you learned from parents?
So the parents that I interface with all have a pornography issue, right, in their home. So one of the parents is using pornography. And I think that knowing that there are a lot of abusive behaviors that surround pornography is really important for people to understand. So lying, manipulation, gaslighting, living that double life, and then, blaming your behaviors on someone else, blame shifting, all of those are abusive behaviors. So more or less, as people use pornography, their behaviors become more and more abusive. And if you're in a relationship with an active pornography user, you're in an abusive relationship. I think that's really important for people to know. Similarly, if you engage in pornography yourself, then you are going to have a serious harmful negative effect on the people around you. And getting out of it's going to be very difficult. So one thing that's really important for me to tell parents about is that they need, in order to really teach their kids, they need to learn how to establish safety in their own home. They need their behaviors to be safe. So if you are the victim in this situation, knowing how to set boundaries, knowing how to stand up for truth and righteousness or for health or whatever paradigm you use, like knowing how to set boundaries so your family is a safe place. If you are a user, learning how to not be abusive anymore, right? Learning how to be honest and learning how to not blame other people for your actions is essential, because it really starts with us. And no matter how much we teach them, if we're not an example, it's really not going to go very far.
Yeah, it's pointless if we're not actively doing that. But I think that's so huge. What you talked about is all these surrounding behaviors. We focus in on pornography or we focus in on some of these, but they are a symptom of all these other behaviors that kind of come together. And that's what worries me, is because I'm seeing that kind of abusive, predatory behavior happening at younger and younger ages.
Mm-hmm.
I was telling you early, and I'll tell the audience so we did a podcast last month, not a podcast, a webinar about predators. And I had my 15-year-old son edit it for me. And he watched it and he was like, "Mom, I have to tell you," he was like, "there was a kid in my class and he had nudes." And I asked him, "How did you get those, or what's going on there?" And he said, "It was everything you said in that webinar about predators. It was how he groomed them. He groomed these girls." And that blew my mind. Mm-hmm. I was happy that my son had made that connection, but it freaked me out that these kids are learning this predatory, this dishonesty, this lack of authenticity at such a young age of how to do that. And so these things that you and I maybe learned from several sources, teachers, church leaders, parents, that number of people is diminishing. And these things that we took as common sense as for parents is no longer common sense of what is respect, what is consent, what is kindness, what is honesty. And so these are lessons that you cannot teach too often. We have got to repeat these and explain them and be an example of that all the time, because everyone is deceiving them everywhere. Every image they see in media is a constant deception that we have got to teach them to know the difference between truth and lies.
And also, if we are not actually living that, they will know, right? And you'll have this lack of integrity in your family. And that basic foundational lack of integrity in your family, where you say one thing but do a different thing, they're going to pick up on that. And that's what they end up doing too.
Absolutely.
So it's super important if you have pornography use in your home. Like, we have a daily group for women. We have multiple groups per day, multiple time zones. We have a checklist for women to go off of if their husbands are using porn. Like, what do I do? Where do I start? Like, it's essential to really face those things head on and face the behaviors, because either ignoring them or pretending that they don't exist isn't going to keep your kids safe.
Absolutely. What final words of wisdom do you have for our parents that are facing just so many different obstacles that our parents did not face? What's your final word here, Anne?
So I do use a pseudonym, but a lot of people know me, and she knows me from that. So No worries there. I go by Anne online. I think my final word of wisdom would be that it's okay. Like, everybody makes mistakes. Human beings make messes, but healthy human beings clean up their mess. So as you go through life, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to do the best you can. You're going to do the best you can with what knowledge that you had at the time. Right. And so not necessarily looking back and feeling like shame or guilt about anything that's happened in the past, but just slowly moving forward, one step in front of the other, trying to improve, getting educated, and knowing that there is no mistake that you've made. There's nothing that you've done that is going that will be like permanently harmful if you start making steps toward health and repair now, right?
Absolutely.
You can repair any of those things that have been done in the past. And I really believe in hope for families and for individuals, and know that no matter where you've come from, that you really can create the healthy, peaceful family that you deserve.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. All the parenting experts I talk to around the country, when it comes to sex, when it comes to technology, every single one of them has a horror story about how they screwed these talks up with their kids. Yeah. So all of us are going to make mistakes. None of us are going to do this perfectly. We just have to keep trying. And that's what our kids expect. That's what they deserve. That's what our families deserve. Thank you, Anne, for coming on and doing such a great job and talking with us. Everybody take a chance to look at our new edition of How to Talk to Your Kids About Pornography. It's available on Amazon. And in the next couple of weeks, we'll probably be doing some giveaways. Check out Betrayal Trauma Recovery. Like she said, there are tons of groups. They have this amazing checklist to help women to determine what they need, what the next steps they need to do. So thank you so much for meeting with us.